Welcome to the February program, and my name is Bruce Hale. I'm the program committee chair. Okay, so today is Missy Rodey, and she did a climb to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro several years ago and has produced a really nice presentation that she's done at other places in Colorado, and she's here today to share it with you.
Okay, can you hear me? I am really pleased to tell you a little bit. Well, actually, I'm going to start the talking about the mountain itself, and then I will get into the particular hike that I took. I know at least one person here has climbed it. Has anyone else? 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Well, I'm sorry we won't have time for everybody to come up and give a little bit of a talk. As it is, I get so interested and excited about this that I have timers waving hands when I get to the point where I need to start winding down. My trip was 6 years ago, which is really surprising to me that it has gone so fast. It was planned and organized by my 2 boys, my son Kevin and my son Derek, and they knew I had an interest in Kilimanjaro. I had been lucky enough to go to the country previously, and on one of the stops that I made, we were actually lodged where I could see the mountain. And I thought at that time, what a grand adventure that would be. So the boys surprised me, and we had an absolutely amazing trip together. The idea for this talk was born 4 years ago, right after I had moved here from Durango, and was hiking with a club member and officer, Jerry Fleming. And Jerry had very recently done the same thing, and he loved his hike as I did mine, and he suggested that the 2 of us get together and make a presentation. Well, unfortunately, Jerry passed away, so I'd kind of like to say I'm doing this in his memory. He was a special guy, and I'm sorry he's not here with me. Okay, Mount Kilimanjaro. It is one of the coveted 7 summits of the world, and I would suggest the easiest of those to climb. It is called the Pride of East Africa, and as you see here, it is the tallest freestanding mountain in the world. The mountain has, as you're climbing, you go through 5 different climate zones, and I will introduce you to each one of those as I go through here. It's part of what makes the climb so special, because you're seeing different terrain and looking at different scenes as you go from bottom to top. And as you see, from the start up to the top, it's like going from the equator to the North Pole in terms of vegetation and changes in landscape. So the first zone is the bushland zone, or the lower slope, and I've put the altitudes that pertain to each of these different zones there, and also the temperatures, which became very important to me. So we did not actually hike through the bushland, and most people do not. We were taken by van through the bushland to our starting off point. But the bushland is an area of cultivation. Coffee is produced here, and a lot of different fruits. And it's very rich and lush, has the largest amount of rain on Kilimanjaro. The second zone, which is where we started, is the rainforest. And you can see here that from 5,000 or almost 6,000 feet to 9,000 is where we do most of our climbing here in Tucson. So this felt pretty comfortable to me. The days were warm, and they can be extremely hot. It's a very moist area, very lush foliage, and the trees form a canopy as you walk through over the trail. So it's absolutely beautiful. If you're really lucky, you can see monkeys along the way. We saw one, and we're really very pleased to have done that. The third zone is the heath or heather zone of the mountain, and here we are leaving the 9,000 foot mark and going up into the 11,000. And then from there, still in this heather zone, the moorland, which they call has lower plants and so forth, goes up to 13,000 feet. The days are very moderate, and the nights are beginning to cool off. The temperatures fluctuate wildly, so there's no way to anticipate what you're going to find. The fourth zone is the alpine desert zone. We spent our first day climbing through the rainforest, and then we have come to the alpine desert, and we're at between 13,000 and 16,000 feet. Days are comfortable, nights not quite so much. It was getting pretty cold. But as you can see, this is a very severe landscape, not as much so as the Arctic level that we'll get to. But already here, the air is getting thin. And this is the time when the guides will begin to be concerned about altitude sickness. And so they spend their days observing us for altitude sickness that can be headache, dizziness, and so forth, but it can progress to pulmonary edema, which is very serious, or cerebral edema. So they take it very seriously, and I'll tell you a little about that a little later. But just to give you a really quick example of what I started wearing to bed while I was here, we have tents, a sleeping bag, and a pad, sleeping pad. So, particularly up at the top here, I was wearing 2 layers of thick, long underwear, 2 pairs of very heavy socks, a turtleneck, a heavy mid-layer turtleneck, a fleece, the heaviest puffy jacket that I was able to find prior to the hike, over which I put my rain jacket. I had my hiking pants on and my rain pants on as well. And then I had a hat over which I pulled the hood, and that is how I slept, the amount I actually did sleep, which was not too much for a number of reasons. But it was at this level that, because I was a female, the only female on our trip, I had my own tent. But right here, I climbed in the tent with both of my boys. It was just impossible to stay warm enough on my own. The final zone is the Arctic zone, and this has extremely severe weather. The nights when we got up to the very top before the summit would be minus 15 degrees. And you're pretty exposed. The wind the wind chill takes it lower than that. So it was a difficult area to survive in, but it was austerely gorgeous, I found. So let's go from here to the best season for climbing. January to March and June to October are considered the best times to climb. September is the very busiest, and the mountain has gotten crowded. There are many, many more people climbing now than even when I did. April to May is the wet time of the year that most everybody tries to avoid. And because September is so busy, October might be the very best time to do that. There are 6 routes that can take you to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro. And the goal for each and every one of them is to reach Uru Peak, which is the high point of the mountain. but all routes have the same goal, and all routes, though they're different, will take you there to the top. The routes differ, so if you were looking into how you wanted to do a hike, what trail you'd like to take, the routes are different based on popularity and therefore the crowdedness of them. The level of difficulty, several of them are more difficult than others, and the acclimatization possibility as you climb. And bar none, the longer you spend on the mountain, the better your success rate is going to be, because you have had time to acclimatize. The accommodations can change. We have one, and I'll show you soon, that actually has huts, so you're not in tents and on the ground. But all routes are about 42 miles. So regardless of which one you pick, you're going to go about the same distance, but just differently. What are your likelihoods of reaching the summit? Well, they're based on several things. Certainly weather is going to make a big difference. We had really nice weather. The group before us had rain every day. And the thought of doing this in the rain, just kind of gives me itches, because it would not have been fun. Typically, the tours will accept people between the ages of 12 and 70. I actually snuck in at 73, and only because they didn't know I was 73. When my sons made the reservations, they did not ask for ages. I guess they figured that boys would not bring their 73-year-old mother up Kilimanjaro, but untrue, they did. And we were told that there was a famous Hollywood actor that had tried to go with the same company, the Killer Warriors, that we went with, and he was turned down because the company was afraid of their exposure. And rumor has it that that was Harrison Ford. So I feel very fortunate to have been able to do that, even though I snuck in. Individual preparation makes a big difference, of course, and your susceptibility to altitude sickness is different based on your body chemistry. So if you're lucky and can take the time to acclimatize, you're probably going to have a comfortable time. And then there are always unforeseen mishaps. We passed, I don't have a pointer, so. This is the stretcher that they use to take people down. And it would be a severely bumpy ride, I'm here to tell you. You would prefer not to have to do that. So, as I said or indicated to you, our company policy was to monitor its climbers for the possibility of altitude sickness. On the first day, they established our baseline levels, and then every day thereafter, they took readings both in the morning and in the evening. They were looking for the signs of sickness, altitude sickness, and they were constantly observing for your overall health and well-being. They looked for, appetite changes, mood changes, extreme tiredness, and so forth. But they also measured oxygen saturation, which is an indication of how much oxygen gets carried to your extremities, which is pretty important when you're climbing. And their policy was if it fell to 60, you were taken off the mountain. The level is, normal level is like around 95, so this is generous. And I suspect if it was falling towards that level, they would take you off as well. We had one member of our climbing group that was in the 70s, and you could tell he was struggling. They monitor your heart rate as well. If it gets too high, they'll just pay more attention to you. Okay, I'm going to tell you about the different routes that you can take to go up. The first one is the Morongo route. It's considered the easiest and is often called the tourist route or even the Coca-Cola route because they serve Coca-Cola in the huts. And so you start down, you're not going to see me. You start down here at the east side of the mountain and climb up. You can actually see the huts identified there, and then summit from that side. It's, as I say, it's one of the easier routes, but it is definitely not easy. And even though it's referred to as the tourist route, it is not for tourists. It would be very, very difficult to do that if you did not have real hiking experience and some training to do it. It's the only one that has huts. It's comfortable, steady, steep, gradual slope, not easy. And it's the only route that uses the same path to go up and come back down again. It's often only 4 nights, which does not allow for much acclimatization. There's no camping equipment necessary, so often the budget operators would like to do this for you. But the success rate is only about 30% of those that start that will actually finish it. The second one is the Makame route. This is the most popular route, and as opposed to the Coca-Cola route, this is called the whiskey route because you have to theoretically be stronger and better prepared in order to do it. And it starts over on the western side of the mountain and climbs up to the top. You can see, whoops, I just want to show you because this is going to be true on all of them. After you've gotten to around the top here of this particular trail and most others, you begin to climb down a little bit, though it's not a great difference in elevation. Circle the mountain and come up from the back side. Okay. So that's true of almost all of them. This route includes 50% of people use this. It's strenuous than the one we talked about before with steeper ups and downs. It has become very crowded. It includes the Barranco Wall, which is one of the steep climbs that most of these routes will take. It's about 850 feet high. I think it takes about an hour and a half to do it, but it's a steep climb with some exposure. There is a higher success rate on this route, mainly because it usually is longer in duration. Can get up to 85% success rate on this. The Rongai route is theoretically the easiest climb up the mountain with excellent success rates. It rises very steadily without any steep inclines, including not having the Barranco Wall as part of its path. It's the only climb that approaches Mount Kilimanjaro from the north. So you actually start in Kenya and come on down and then join up with one of the other paths that would have come up from the southeast. And you circle the summit and approach from that back side again. Because you've come through Kenya and it's slower and less steep, the chances to view wildlife are great. And a lot of people speak that that's one of the real highlights for them. You get to see both sides of the mountain and both those countries, and that has had an appeal. Because of the transportation, starting in the north and exiting in the south, the cost of this hike is higher than most of the others, I would say. The success rates are about 80% or up to 95% if you take the longer trip. And it allows you having a very short day before you summit, which is another advantage of that one. The Shira route is the fourth route, and it approaches from the west. You see the gate over there. And actually, that first part and their first day, they're not hiking. They're being taken by van up to the point where many of us have hiked to. This is a four-wheel drive road that is used to bring supplies in. There's also a helicopter pad there so that if anybody needs to be evacuated from the mountain, that it's done there. Usually done in 6 days. It can be longer depending on your guides. And the first day follows that all-wheel drive road. One of the things that would have been really disappointing to me is that it skips the rainforest area, which I thought was just really richly interesting. It does include the Barranco Wall. That's that one steep climb. The success rate here is 65 to 75%, and it does allow for a very easy day before the summit, which is always good. The La Mosha route is the fifth one. It's considered the most beautiful route, and this is the one that I took, the boys and I took. It approaches from the west. Again, you can see it starts over there on the left-hand side of the screen, joins up with several other trails as it comes towards the base of the cone, and circles around south and approaches from the north side again. The first 2 days of our hike went through that rainforest, which was really lovely. It's a longer trek usually of 7 or 8 days. We actually were out on our 9 days and 8 nights. So we had a longer one than even that. It does include that Barranco Wall, and the success rate, because of the length of the trip, is around 85%. The last one, this Umwe route, is the most difficult and demanding. It apparently is spectacular, but only 1% of people climb it because it is really hard. It's a very, very difficult hike. It's direct, it's very steep, it's often exposed. It includes the Barranco Wall, but other very steep inclines that other routes do not include. In some places, you're hand-hauling yourself up the mountainside, and there aren't many people who would want to do that. It's usually 6 or 7 days, and the success rate, because of the difficulty, is only around 60 to 70%. You have to have some mountaineering experience to use this route, and I am sure the guides, the companies really screen for that because it could be extremely dangerous. Okay, having whipped through that, I will begin to tell you a little bit about our climb. I was very lucky because I was living in Durango at that time and living at an elevation of 7,300 feet. So I really had an advantage over the youth of my sons, which of course I didn't have. But in order to do this, you really need to have a large base of fitness. You have to have been active over time. You can't just prepare for this in a month or two. But in addition to being well-conditioned, you really do need to do some training in order to be able to do this comfortably. As I say, I was lucky. I was living in Durango. And those of you who have been to Durango know that Fort Lewis College is up on the mesa overlooking the town. Not long before I did the hike, the college and town cooperated to put in this series of steps. As it says, there are 500 steps, 250 feet to the top. My training was to go up and down 4 times within an hour. And I think I really benefited from that. I think as much from the training on the downhill as the uphill climb, because I had been doing quite a bit of hiking. So here we are getting started. And on the far left is my son, Kevin, myself. The middle is Patrick, who is a fireman from Baltimore. My younger son, Derek, and Eric Conover, who was hired by the company to take videos, which he made into YouTube presentations as a way of advertising the company's trip. His very good friend, Patrick, the fireman, came along to help him with all of his equipment and so forth. They both were adorable, and we stay in contact with both of them. So it was a nice group. As you see, we're getting started right where I used to live at 7,300 feet. So I was feeling pretty comfortable. This is the start. The guys, these are the porters, are being given their equipment and the supplies. They're carrying all of our food, they're carrying oxygen, they're carrying, everything we would need. This is a group of guys that's been together for 20 years. They're a family, and they delight in one another's company. They trust one another and rely on one another. It was just wonderful to see. So here they are getting their burdens, if you will. They have to weigh the duffel bags before they could take off, a maximum of 45 pounds, and they're very strict about it. I was told, I talked to both the owner of the company and my lead guide just within the last couple of weeks, and the company owner was saying, these guys, like I, have gotten older, but they don't want to quit. And so what they're doing with the older ones is rotating them in and out, so to give them a little bit more of a rest. I wish I could introduce you to each member of the team. Each and every one was delightful. But this is our cook. This is Louis, and you can see the joy on his face. They're all this way. They love what they're doing. They take pride in what they're doing. And as I say, they're a family to one another. So they make the trip so enjoyable, just out of the joy for themselves. We were introduced to each porter and guide as we got started on this hike, and they would dance. Each one individually do a dance and introduce themselves at that. And then they invited us to dance and introduce ourselves. It was at this point that I got the tag Mama Missy, and that still holds today. It sometimes was shortened to Mama, maybe often, but I was definitely the elder of the group, no question about that. Every day after hiking, we had happy hour. We dropped our things in the tents that had already been erected by the porters who preceded us. And then we sat down to talk about whatever and everything, as well as to reminisce about the day's hike. And also because the difficulties coming up. So there's always conversation about what's that going to be like. But at happy hour, you get your choice of hot tea, hot coffee, hot chocolate. We had popcorn and nuts, and it was just a very collegial time. We all got along very well. I am a lacto-ovo vegetarian, which means that I will eat dairy products and I will eat eggs, but no meat, animal protein. And so they did a wonderful job of producing beautiful and very tasty meals for me. There was always something fresh on the plate, but the meals were very creative and beautifully prepared, beautifully presented. The guys wanted meat, and it started with bacon every morning, and they would have like luncheon meats for lunch, for sandwiches, or something left over, but I never really saw leftovers, to be very honest. And they would have chicken and beef stew often, some formulation of that at night. We always had fresh fruit. And these are the fruits from the base of the mountain, that bushland area that we drove through. We saw small villages, and we saw the orchards that are producing these fruits. And so I'm quite sure these were resupplied as we went along, but they were always available. You see here, too, we always had bread. They always had honey and jam. They were trying to get calories in us because of the cold that you had to endure and certainly the energy that required to do the hike. Here is a scene of this was probably lunch. We always had avocado, again, for its caloric content, a good way to get us to eat some fat. And we had almost anything you would need to make your meal taste better, though I don't think it was highly used. Mustard or ketchup or those kinds of things for sandwiches if you were having sandwiches. This is our dining hall. We all gathered there. Meals were served family style. And it was a wonderful time because, first of all, it was warm. And as we got higher in elevation, we would gather there long before the meal was served at night. This is our home away from home. These are the tents that the company provides and sets up for you during the day while you're hiking, so it will be there when you arrive at the camp. As I said, most had double tents. I had a single, but they were adequate to the extent that they could possibly be, but at the very higher elevations there was no fooling. It got cold. This is the comforts of home, if you will. Our little outhouse and a pump toilet, which was nice. And you may or may not be able to see the sanitizer that's by the tent. They were very, very cautious about sanitation. And so that was always available. I learned, probably as soon as we got to that alpine level, not to drink very much after dinner. Like nothing. Because on one evening, I did have to get out of my tent and walk to the porta potty, which is the one and only time I ever wanted to do that. And I was successful with my fluid intake regulation. This is a scene in the early morning before we get going on our hike. These are our porters that have packed up the tents while we're eating breakfast and precede us to the next campsite. Lava Tower is an area at 15,000 feet, and we actually spent 3 days there. The benefit of that, of course, was acclimatization. So we took day hikes, but stayed in the same camp all that time. And a really fun part about this is that right here, we actually picked up, for the first and only time, cell service. So we all climbed up the rocks here and called home. And I was extremely pleased that my husband picked up the phone. I would have been so disappointed. But all the guys called their girlfriends or wives, and that was a special part of that particular stay. Here we are at night. It's splendid. The skies are usually very clear. The stars are amazing. Our stars are amazing. This might go one step beyond that. They were absolutely beautiful in the sky. And here, we're leaving that campsite and climbing this Bronco wall. So, can you see the people climbing up? Okay. There's one area of a little bit of exposure. For anybody that's done hiking, it's not going to be too ominous, but you are careful. Really watching your feet, watching your hands, and knowing that you have this big climb and to be careful with it. And I think I showed a slide and forgot to say it before, but the Swahili word for slowly is puli puli. And the guides would always say, puli puli. And if you got anxious and wanted to get off, puli puli. It was, and an important part. At the top of the Barranco wall, this is what we were greeted with. And awesome, austere, dangerous looking scene, but just glorious. I mean, it just awesome. We deviated on our particular hike from the normal hike on the La Mosha Trail. And we did that by climbing the western breach instead of swinging south around the summit. This path was established by Scott Fisher. You may or may not remember that Scott was an American mountaineer, climbed all the highest peaks without oxygen. He was a guide on Kilimanjaro and loved it. So upon his death, he actually died on Everest in a storm. And so I think it was 1996. So this plaque is at the base of the western breach in his honor. So what about the breach? It's the most challenging, steepest, most dangerous way of getting up to the crater area. It's a 4-hour climb to the breach. Only 5% of people who summit use this access. In 2006, 3 Americans and their porters had been killed as a rock ledge was released with melting glacier. And so it was closed for a period of time, 5 to 7 years, I believe, and then reopened when it looked like it would be safe enough to do so. It includes an area called the Rock Steps that are 100 feet from the top. This is a point of absolutely no return. You cannot turn around and go back at that point. And this is the most difficult part of the climb, that last 100 feet. We had to begin at 4 or even before if we were ready to avoid any melting of the snow and ice on the path up, and that would result in any rock fall. There's no single path of it. The lead guide is the one who finds the way up, and it has to be specially trained guides in order to do that. The porters, I might say, did not take this route. The porters went around the south part and up and met us at the crater area. Here's a graphic of what that looks like. The Arrow Glacier campsite was where we camped the night before, and the crater campsite was where we camped the night before we summited. So you can see from that point there's a short uphill to the summit of Kilimanjaro. So why take the Western Breach with all of this difficulty and danger? I think my son felt that if you're going to do it, you might as well really challenge yourself. And so this is why he decided on this one. But you also avoid crowds because very, very few people take this. You get to camp at the crater next to the Furtwängler Glacier. And we know these glaciers are disappearing and will probably be gone within 5 to 10 years at the latest. At the top is a lunar-like ash pit of the crater of the volcano. And so that was really pretty interesting. And once we got to camp, we realized that we only had that short little bit to do the next morning, short but steep. But it was really a benefit to be able to do it very quick, short. So this is our lead guide, Wilbert, with the pick. It's the only route that requires using a pick. Here's our assistant head guide behind him, and they are before us trying to pick out which would be the safest way to navigate the chute. After climbing a distance, you actually do get a chance to sit down. Speed is really, really important for them on this route. But they did give us a chance to sit down and rest because you've already climbed a great deal. It's just not been as dangerous or as difficult as what's to come from there. So it was nice to get a breather and settle your nerves a little bit before taking off from there. This is the beginning of the rock steps. And it wasn't until I looked at the pictures that I realized my sons were clinging to the mountain, and I'm the one that's the more exposed of the three. I'm not sure if that was purposeful, but you can see I'm clinging to Derek at this point because I was feeling a little insecure. I asked the guys when we got to the top of the Western Breach to describe what it was like to them. And so these are some of the synonyms that they used. I would emphasize the one that it was much more than expected. Even though we knew the reputation of the climb, It really was much more than we had expected that it would be. But it was exhilarating when you actually, after you got to the top, particularly. But it was daunting and taken very, very seriously. I don't know whether you noticed, but we all had to wear helmets because of the risk of falling rock. But once you got to the top, after those 100 last feet, you were here at the crater area of Kilimanjaro. And this is Furtwängler Glacier that is shrinking 1.5 feet every year. And at this point is probably shrinking more rapidly even than that. It's named after a German hiker who summited in 1912 without oxygen and was among the first to do it. He actually, having gotten up there and spent some time, skied down, which I can't even imagine, but he has quite the reputation. So the next day, we got up and did the last little hike up to the summit. I think at this point it was 500 feet maybe. It wasn't very far. But the boys decided that I should go the highest. And so at the sign, they boosted me up. But we were all just very excited to have made that climb and to have finally gotten to the summit. It was a moment of just real pleasure. We were on the roof of Africa, and we had great appreciation for that. That same day, you begin your descent. And you actually descend 10,000 feet in that same day. And as you can see, the terrain is very, very rocky and a lot of loose rocks. So it's a difficult hike down. And people get injured on this on a regular basis because it's so easy to slip and slide. I can't imagine doing it in the rain, for instance. But halfway down, the cooks set up a lunch for us, and so we were able to take a break and enjoy that. The last day of our hike, we descended another 5,000 feet to the end of our trail. And at this point, we went back through that rainforest, the beautiful lushness of it, and were able to look back and see the mountain that we had climbed. And it was just exhilarating. It was beautiful and just so nice to be able to see it in that perspective, having now gained an appreciation for all of it. And here we are at the bottom. This is Derek signing in that he had completed the hike. We were each one given a certificate of completion. And as I said, this is the easiest of the 7 summits. And so it's often referred to as everybody's Everest. And I think people with the right training can do this comfortably. Well, not temperature-wise, for sure. But the hike and the fact that they force you to go slowly is definitely doable. So thereafter, back in Arusha, we treated ourselves. The boys had great big hamburgers, including bacon, as I see. I had a very large, delicious salad, and we all enjoyed Kilimanjaro beer. So that was great. I wanted to take just a couple of minutes and talk to you about the effects of climate change on Kilimanjaro and on the tourism there. The glaciers are shrinking, as I've said, and which you know, and will be gone. There's no question about that. Recent, as in the last month, maybe 6 weeks, there's been a lot of rain. And so that melting has been exacerbated, and both the glaciers and the snowfall. Last month, a tourist and guide died in that western breach because of the fact that it has become so less frozen, let me say that. So the western slope has now been closed by the Tanzanian government. The head guide that I talked to said they're hopeful that it might be reopened, but there's no guarantees. Right now, if you're at the base of the western breach, you can actually see water running down it. And standing there, you can hear rocks becoming, or falling, or coming loose. So the government has closed it. But there are going to be really serious repercussions of this the climate change. If Kilimanjaro were to lose that snowy top, it would be dramatic and extremely serious. Not only would the revenue of climbers at Kilimanjaro decrease amazingly, I don't know what hikes would continue at that point. I suppose you could still summit, but the path would be certainly very different. So the guides and the porters who make their living doing this would cease to be able to make that income. But most importantly, the survival of those local villages and that cultivation area that we went through the first day would suffer tremendously because they rely on their water for their drinking water, the glacial water for their drinking water, for irrigating their crops, and they even use hydroelectric power that's generated off the water that the glaciers produce. So we all hate to hear that coming. So in reflection, and it was fun for me to go back over this, I had an immense sense of gratitude for the opportunity to do this, the fact that I did it with my sons, which was extremely satisfying and fun and meaningful, and for the gift of health that allowed me to do it. And I never have taken that for granted. I felt an immense sense of privilege to have had this experience for all the reasons you can imagine. And I actually was very humbled for having done it. When you consider the power and the majesty of the mountain, you can feel pretty small. But it's magic. The majesty of the mountain stays with me. I remember it constantly. So it was a wonderful, wonderful, amazing adventure for me. And that's the end of my slides.
Did anybody give you medication for?
Oh, Diamox. No, that would have to be provided by yourself.
Yeah, but I mean, you were allowed to take that?
Yes, I did not, but several members of the climbing group that we were on did take Diamox, yes. And, you know, because I started at 7,300 feet, I mean, that's where I was living, my chances of experiencing altitude sickness were less than the others. But yes, they did.
Did you have some oxygen if you could need it?
They carried one small tank of oxygen. They wouldn't have used it unless you were seriously ill. Yeah, and that's the advantage of going more slowly, taking more days to do it. Yes?
How many porters did you have?
Oh, good question. There were 8 crew members for every person. Yeah, thank you for asking that. I should have said that along the way. So it's a huge team that puts this together, and each and every one of them is needed. So we were grateful for them, as well as enjoyed them immensely. So. Yes, Bobby.
Was it just you and your boys, or was there a larger group?
Well, it was just Kevin, Derek, and myself, and then these 2 other guys, Eric Conover, who made the YouTube, and his friend Patrick, who came along to help him with his equipment. So it was really, yeah, it was all 5 of us, and we loved the adventure together. We all got along beautifully well and had fun. We were generational steps, and that contributed to the enjoyment of it. It was really fun. Anne?
How many people attend the summit every year?
Ooh, mercy, I don't know that. I can't tell you that. It's a lot. It's a lot. And it would be something good to Google. I'm not sure. Yes.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I've always heard about your trips, but this really visualized it. It was great.
Thank
But I know you're a good photographer. Did you bring a camera with you or just a cell phone?
No, I brought my camera, the one with the telephoto lens,
Oh, you did?
and carried that all the way up. And actually, which is one of the reasons I've now switched to the smaller Sony, but also the guides and the porters had such fun using it that I was glad I had it. Yeah, no, they really enjoyed it.
Did you carry it or did they carry it?
I carried it, unless they wanted to borrow it for fun. But no, I was carrying it. I had always carried it when I was hiking prior to that, so I was accustomed to it. Thank you. Yes?
What was the name of the group you went with?
We went with Killa Warriors.
I'm sorry?
Killa Warriors,
Killer Warriors.
and they're based in Canada. The co-owner actually lives in Arusha, so there is constant communication between them, and the owner that's in Canada was actually there when we started our hike, and I'm sure was a little bit nervous about the fact that he hadn't checked my age. But he was kind enough not to mention it. But so, yeah, right. That's right. I should have.
Would you be willing to share that website for the YouTube video?
Oh, absolutely. I would be very happy to do that. And I send it to Ken. Okay. Yeah, because it's pretty awesome. He did use a drone, which was illegal. And so he got some magnificent pictures, but we were delayed after we ended the climb there where we were signing out while the government was trying to deal with Eric and the company to decide what to do about it. I think they were pretty lenient. I imagine there were some fees involved, but the result was a wonderful YouTube presentation. So, yes?
Did the guy who was doing the video, did he go up the Western Reach also and carry that?
Yes, he did.
Wow.
Yes, he did. And he had several special porters with him, helping him with that. But he did indeed. And Eric Conover, who did this, makes videos of his trips all around the world. And he's invited by these different companies to produce YouTubes from his visit. And he's been in ice igloos all around the world. If it exists, he's been there. And so if you log on and look at some of, the Kilimanjaro hike, I think you might get entranced by some of the other things he's done because he does a really good job. Yes.
I have nothing but admiration for you because Barbara and I did the Coca-Cola route.
Oh, you did?
We were 25 years younger than you were when
Oh.
you did this.
Oh.
And believe me, we worked real hard to get up there, so my hat's off to you.
Well, thank you. My hat's off to you for doing it. What route did those others that have climbed take? I know Linda took the Lamosha route, right? And you took...
I climbed it in 64.
Oh, wow.
And we went from Nairobi. I have no idea because
Oh.
we weren't paying attention. We just we were down there, and they said there were tours. So we said yes, and they put us out there the next day. We were 3 days up and 2 days down.
Oh, my goodness.
And so we went up in Peter's hut the first night. That's on the other side.
Mhm.
And a Kibu hut at the top. And they get you up at 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and you arrive at the peak at sunrise.
Yes.
It's so awesome.
It is awesome.
Takes you right away.
Yeah, we did as well, and it's wonderful if you can do that. Some tour groups offer a full moon hike so that you summit with the full moon. Some of them offer a new moon hike, which just allows glorious skies wherever you are because there's so little light around you to disturb it. Yes?
There were just two of us, and we had one porter guide. One guy came.
Whoa, I admire you. Did you know what you were in for?
No, we had no idea.
That's probably better.
We weren't dressed for it
Yeah,
And when you cross the timber line, of course, there's no wood to fire.
right.
He's carrying wood on his head for the fire up at Hebrew Hut so we can have fire before we look.
Oh, my goodness. Ours carried kerosene, I believe, for cooking and so forth. So 64 was 30-some years before. Yeah, 40 years. 40 years. Yeah. Yeah. When we did it, the cost without flights was somewhere around $7,000 per person. I imagine it has gone up a little since that time, maybe a lot. But the shorter hikes can be done less expensively. I think the fact that we took the Western Breach made it more expensive because of the specially trained guides that were required and the danger involved for all of their crew.
You ever rope up on that route?
Not on ours, and I don't know if they ever do on that Rongai route that's so steep and awful. I don't know. I haven't heard about that. Yes.
Have you seen people that need to be helicoptered down?
Yes.
Or people that were seriously hurt?
Yes. On our way down that first day, that 10,000-foot decline, there was a gentleman that had to be taken out on that stretcher. Annually, about 10 people die on the mountain. And so, the guides and the companies are very conscious of trying to prevent any illness or injury. But, like on the last 10,000 or that 10,000-foot thing, they can't be holding on to you. So we were given poles if we wanted to use them, which was pretty essential, actually. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. You were very attentive.